Welcome to War Games on Toast, all of you lovely people. I am once again back talking about the latest edition of Warcry, and I am once again back talking about warbands. Today I am talking about one of my favourite conceptual factions in current Warcry, and I am very excited to break them down. Today I am tackling the awkwardly named DARKOATH SAVAGERS. But before we get into all of that, please consider dropping a like, leaving a comment and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps me fight against the dastardly YouTube algorithmic demon, and if my voice sounds a little bit weird, that's because 1, my microphone is on the way out, and 2, I am recovering from tonsillitis. Hopefully both will be fixed before the next episode. The reason why I'm recording this one now with all of these issues is because I didn't want to miss a week's show. So here we are. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. Before we get into all of the nitty gritty with the DARKOATH, we first need to do a little bit of story time. After all, how can we ever talk about a faction without first sipping on some hot chocolate and getting cozy under a nice fluffy blanket?
The Dark Gods are cruel, bloodthirsty, petulant and tempestuous at the best of times, but their influence is intoxicating to the realm-bound mortals of Sigmar's new domain. The DARKOATHs are barbarians who have sworn themselves over fully to the demonic masters, and in return for their service, wanton slaughter and other vile deeds, they are rewarded with immeasurable gifts of strength. The cycle continues until their promise cannot be fulfilled or they are slain in battle, whichever comes first.
The DARKOATHs are a wonderfully rich faction that bring a mostly unheard of permanence to the game of Warcry. Very rarely are effects, abilities or buffs bestowed for more than a round. Very rarely do factions have free reign over their dice, the ability to gamble one turn to gain even more power later on. The DARKOATHs are fascinating as a result and truly stand out as a faction that, whilst visually similar to others, mechanically stand tall. The concepts brought forth by the DARKOATHs are what get me so excited to play them. As we will soon find out when we break them down, the DARKOATHs have some very interesting abilities that unlock some great long-term planning that requires a balance and no small amount of bartering with the Dark Gods themselves. But before we get into those units, I am going to quickly touch on the DARKOATH reaction because this will affect every single one of them, and reactions are pretty darn important. The reaction is instinctive dodge, and it does the following. A fighter can make this reaction after they are targeted by an attack, after the hit rolls have been made. Roll a dice for each critical hit. On a 4+, that critical hit becomes a regular hit instead. This reaction is fine. It has a place, it's just a little bit odd. Like with many reactions, it is forever battling with the universal reaction of counter. And if I am being totally honest, I would be very tempted to run counter instead of this in many situations. However, instinctive dodge does have some very clear use against certain factions that elevates this to being pretty darn interesting. But let's get the negatives out of the way first. The effect is random. You only get the bonus on a 4+, and this isn't exactly great odds, especially when reactions cost AP. This is what holds it back, and it holds it back quite a bit. You won't be throwing this out all willy-nilly, you'll be saving it for special occasions, which actually is much easier to do. You will notice that this reaction, unlike most reactions, is used after hit rolls have been made. This means you can not only look to see how much damage you will take, and therefore check to see if you will die from the attack, but you can also see how many crits have landed. This is very useful. If there are no crits, you don't need to use it. If there's only one crit and you'll survive, then you probably won't use it. However, many factions have the ability to boost their critical hit chance or straight up boost their critical hit damage. This is where instinctive dodge shines, because the sheer number of crits coming in, or the brute force from those crits, means you're going to die anyway, or you're going to take massive damage. Instinctive dodge gives you a way out of this. Finally, knocking enemies' damage from a crit down to a hit can be incredibly swingy. For example, Scions of Flame. They can swing for as high as 9 damage on their crits. If you instinctive dodge that crit, you have a chance to reduce the damage inflicted by 7 damage per crit dodged. That's a massive swing in terms of damage in your favour, and can increase your survivability drastically on the battlefield. Again, this is not a reaction that you'll use every time on every model, but it has a lot of utility that can really help you counter specific threats from specific factions. And now, before we get onto the units, I thought it was actually also quite important to touch on one other aspect of the DARKOATH, and this also affects the entire warband, and this time it's an ability, and it is what I would consider to be the crux of the DARKOATHs and what makes them unique. It's an ability called a Vow Unfulfilled, and it is a double, and it reads the following. Until the end of this fighter's activation, each time an enemy fighter is taken down, you can pick either this fighter's toughness characteristics, or the attacks or strength characteristic of one weapon this fighter is armed with. Until the end of the battle, add 1 to the characteristic you picked. This ability is outstanding on paper, and frankly, it's pretty darn awesome in practice too. This ability is why I love the DARKOATH, because it brings an element of risk and reward to the proceedings. Instead of burning your doubles on Onslaught, which is the universal ability that is most used in Warcry, you can risk your dice. If you land a kill, you get to permanently increase your stats. This could even be used to increase your attack characteristic, which is like getting a permanent onslaught every single time you do it. That stacks. Not only that, since this ability lasts until the end of their activation, if you can kill multiple enemies, you can buff multiple stats. What if you pushed your toughness just 1 point, and that made all the difference, and all enemy fighters now hit you on a 5+? What if you boosted your strength so you always hit on a 3+? Or what if you just pushed your attacks through the roof and became a whirlwind of death? You can customize your models on the fly and turn your warband into something uniquely dangerous based on the threat you are facing in any given game. A Vow Fulfilled is the ultimate toolbox, the ultimate utility ability that lets the DARKOATH tackle any and all threats. But here lies the trap, the threat. A Vow Fulfilled is ultimately a gamble. It is slow, and you can't buff everyone because it's too expensive and it would take too long. What this means, at least when I played DARKOATH, is that I want to target and buff specific key units in my faction and make them better. Ideally, these units should already be dangerous, already be able to kill reliably. That way they can kill in one turn, and possibly even kill 2 models in one turn and get double the result. So whilst this ability can be used on everyone, it really shouldn't unless the opportunity arises. And it's at this point I will go into the units so you can get a better idea on how the DARKOATH lineup interacts with this very, very powerful ability. So we start with our glorious barbarian leader, the hero to lead our warband, the Slaughterborn. This guy comes in 2 flavours, one with a Geet Big sword and one with a Mama Jamma axe. Both are really strong. We're talking about an average damage of around 9 to 10 per action. against toughness 4 targets. This theoretically lets you cut down multiple chaff per activation and maybe trigger several stat boosts from a Vow Fulfilled every time you activate. But looking at the stats themselves, both come with movement 4, toughness 4 and 20 wounds, rolling in at 180 points. This is pretty on par when it comes to stats, and it is priced accordingly. Offensively though, these guys push some boundaries. Range 1 attacks 5, strength 5, 2/5 damage on the Great Blade, and range 1 attacks 4, strength 6, 3/5 damage on the Great Axe. Of the two profiles, the Axe, despite having less attacks, is actually against everything in the game, bar toughness 7 units where the sword is slightly edges out on average. But since the number of toughness 7 units are so small, this is a fringe case at best, and honestly, I would just take the Axe against everything 100% of the time. And remember, a single stat boost in any stat will push the Axe even further in damage output, especially if you buff his attacks. So when it comes to Vow and stat boosts, you want to absolutely target your attack stat 100% of the time, since this will give you the best returns as your strength is already monstrously high. If you want to be a bit safer, consider bumping your toughness to 5, and this will make most enemies up to 5+ and will really push your survivability. Outside of Vow, the Slaughterborn also gets some more goodies, namely the Slaughterborn can run Display of Brutality, which is a double. On kill, the Slaughterborn can either move or attack as a bonus action. This does of course compete with Vow, but it competes very well. In fact, if you want burst damage, then Display of Brutality is the way to go, as you will always deal more damage in the short term with this. The trade-off is that you will miss out on that permanent stat boost. Finally, we get to Death Blow, which can actually be used by every unit in the faction, but is staggeringly good on the Slaughterborn in particular. Basically, your next attack action on a quad has both hit and crit damage increased by the value of the quad. What does this mean? It means your damage output skyrockets. If you were to get a quad 6, your damage per activation against just about everything jumps to the mid-30s. This is enough to kill any of the Chaos allies, such as the Fomroid Crusher, or the Ogroid Myrmidon, or the Centaurian Marshal, in a single activation, reliably. Even more so if you use Vow early in the game to buff your stats even higher. Basically, the Slaughterborn is a disgustingly effective combatant who can make use of all of his abilities to deal terrifying amounts of damage. If the Slaughterborn strikes first, there is a very good chance the thing he hits will straight up die. Whether you are using this as a way to boost your stats or catapult yourself to new locations, or to power up with a quad and one-shot anything, this guy does work. It's a very, very powerful model. Just be aware your opponents will try to avoid this guy because they don't want to feed him ever. Now, if the Slaughterborn is the muscle behind the Darkoath, the God Speaker is the spiritual support, and honestly one of my favourite models in all of Warcry. In terms of stats, she is nothing special though. Movement 4, toughness 4, and 12 wounds for 105 points, which is very standard, very kind of average. Her attack stats are typical wizard guff as well. She has a range attack, which is range 3 to 7, attack 2, strength 3, 3/6 damage, and a piddly melee attack at range 1, attack 3, strength 3, 1/3 damage. Basically, you don't want her in combat, and her damage output is a little bit spotty at best due to her low number of attacks on her range attack and terrible stats on her melee attack. Theoretically, you can buff her with Vow to increase her range stats, so bumping her attacks and strength to make her more of a destructive range force can be good, but honestly, I don't see this as a worthwhile investment, or moreover, not one that you should seek out. She has more powerful abilities at her disposal, namely her unique double and her unique quad. Her double is called the Visions of Glory, and it does the following. Roll a number of dice equal to the value of this ability. For each roll of a 5+, add 1 wild dice to your saved wild dice. I absolutely love this ability. This is the kind of ability that gets me excited in Warcry. If I have a high double, I nearly always use this ability. Sure, it makes this turn a bit weaker, since I'm not gaining any benefits. But that's exactly what the Dark Oath is all about. Use resources now to make later better. Having more wild dice gives you so much more control over your future turns, it's not even funny. Sometimes I even do the double Visions of Glory if I'm feeling really, really crazy early game. To do this, you activate the God Speaker, you use Visions, and then you wait. You then activate her again later on, and then use Visions a second time. I have rocked up with 4 to 5 wild dice doing this in one turn, and this set me up for the rest of the game. Since wild dice are either used or banked, they never just vanish. This is crazy, crazy strong. And this is followed up by her quad, which is less exciting for me personally, however, it's still quite nice. It reads as follows. Pick a visible enemy model within 3 inches of this fighter and roll a number of dice equal to the value of this ability. For each roll of a 4 to 5 until the end of the battle round, subtract 1 from that fighter's toughness characteristic to a minimum of 1. For each roll of a 6 until the end of the battle, subtract 1 from that fighter's toughness characteristic to a minimum of 1. This can be devastating against certain enemies. Being able to reduce their toughness can allow tanky units to be damaged by your weaker units unbuffed. Since this effect has a chance of being a permanent reduction, this is even better. The downsides are fairly numerous, however. Firstly, it's random. It only works in the 4+ per point reduction, and dice can be fickle. You could burn your quad on this and get nothing or very little in return. Not only that, the permanent effect is only on a 6+, which is not exactly something you can rely on. Finally, the range. If you are within 3 inches of anything you want to reduce the toughness of, you've just put your very squishy God Speaker into range of dying. It's a potentially very powerful ability, and one I have used in a pinch, but is nowhere near as exciting as Visions of Glory, and I tend to keep this last back and using that to give me more dice each turn. She's a little dice farm, and I love it. And next up we go to the Wrath Touched. And right off the bat, I think this guy is pretty bad, at least statistically. Stats-wise, he's like kind of fine for the cost, but his damage is really inconsistent. Sure, he gets 4 attacks, and that is nice, but 1/5 damage is really unreliable. And when we look at other units, he just pales in comparison to them because his damage swings so wildly. Even buffed with Vow, this guy never really takes off. He doesn't really make use of Death Blow, and he just falls a little bit flat across the board. He does get a unique ability, however, and this does bring him up a little bit. It's called Furious Rampage. It's a triple, and it does the following. Roll a dice for each visible enemy fighter within 3 inches of this fighter. On a roll of a 3 to 4, allocate 1 damage point to the fighter being rolled for. On a roll of a 5, allocate a number of damage points to the fighter being rolled for equal to the value of this ability. This ability is quite nice. Nice enough that I do still bring the Wrath Touched from time to time because it adds a little bit of range to the faction, and AoE damage is really nice. Worst case, you do some chip and that makes it easier for your better units to come in and get kills to trigger a Vow. Best case, you take a massive chunk of damage out of the enemy with your hopefully high triple. Now, remember, with the God Speaker, your odds of getting high triples is so much higher than other factions, making this fairly reliable to get. Rolling a 3 to 4 for 1 damage is reliable chip, and a 5+ to deal up to 6 damage, it's pretty nice. He fills a hole in the faction, but don't expect this guy to wow outside of this ability is all I'm going to say on the matter, really. This guy is the first guy I cut whenever I go to make a more custom list outside of the base box. And next up we have the Proven. The Proven actually come in 4 flavours, but they are split into 2 groups of 2 when it comes to weapon options right out of the box. They have no unique abilities, but their stats push them as your elite fighters very, very clearly. All Proven come with movement 4, toughness 4 and 15 wounds, with the axe being 130 points and the spear being 125 points. In terms of attack stats, the axe rocks up with range 1, attacks 3, strength 5, 3/5 damage, which is great. This guy is 1 or 2 vows of being a real, serious, substantial threat, and yet this last is basically a miniature Slaughterborn. However, I am not going to lie, I don't run the Great Axe, even though I love it. The reason for this is because the Great Spear exists, and I think it's better for different reasons. This thing comes with range 2, attacks 3, strength 5, 2/5 damage. Basically, you're dropping 1 point of on-hit damage to gain +1 range, and this extra range is really, really good. I am a sucker for range in nearly all warbands, and when the Darkoath don't have that much speed, and they aren't that tough, having extra range helps you keep you alive and also lets you attack more easily. Sure, the axe will outperform in terms of damage, but I do think the utility of the spear is more beneficial. Both are excellent, so feel free to use Rule of Cool here. And now we have the Proven with Great Blade and the Proven with Great Flail, and this time I think the winner is actually pretty obvious, and it's the Flail. Their stats are basically identical, only the blade gets +1 attack and the flail gains +2 range. This range is great, and you can just use Vow to gain those attacks to make up the difference. In fact, I would argue buffing your flail is probably more important than buffing most things in Darkoath, minus the Slaughterborn of course. Having more attacks and maybe bumping up that strength can turn this into a range 3 nightmare. Again, Proven are pretty elite and burly, but toughness 4 and 15 wounds won't last forever. Being able to outrange most enemies and even outdamage most other range 3 enemies makes the Flail Proven just an all-round great unit. Again, the Rule of Cool totally applies, and I ain't going to lie, the Great Blade looks way better on the tabletop, just saying. There are a whopping 4 versions of Glory Seekers in Darkoath. There actually used to be 5, believe it or not, but one was dropped in 2nd edition, and these guys are your chaff. You get 5 in the box and they are fine. They are all toughness 3, wounds 10, unless you have a shield, then you go up to toughness 4. These are pretty squishy across the board though, and they really do just fit that chaff role. Like the Proven, they have no unique abilities, and honestly, they really aren't worth buffing with Vow for the most part because they just die too quickly. Stick to Proven and the Slaughterborn for those buffs, and consider keeping these around as more of a throwaway onslaught user. When it comes to weapons, you have the option of the Great Axe, paired weapons, spear, or a shield. However, the box does not give you enough parts to build them all, which is a real pain in the arse and is something I am very happy modern warbands have managed to fix. When it comes to which weapons are best, I would say the paired weapons are pretty darn good as they bump your attacks to 4, which is very nice. And all Glory Seekers have strength 4, so you're going to do some nice damage here, even if you're swinging with only 1 to 3 damage. Spears are also excellent as they add range 2 to the mix, in addition to doing 1/4 damage, which is a nice bump in crit damage. The most interesting weapon here is probably the Great Axe, since this thing does 2/4 damage, but you only get 2 attacks, which actually makes it very tempting to use Vow to buff this model up. This is a trap, however, do not do that, but do consider using Onslaught. Shields aren't worth it in my opinion. The bump in toughness isn't as good as the added extras any of the other weapons bring. Because of the weird build restrictions, I would go with 3 paired weapons, 1 spear and 1 great axe. This gives you a very nice variety of weapons and helps your chaff deal damage, stay alive and support the warband. And in conclusion for the units, honestly, the biggest issue with DARKOATH is just the lack of build options inside the box itself. This prevents you from making the warband you want to make, and instead funnels you down a path that's a little bit too restrictive. But aside from that, DARKOATH is really cool. They have loads of damage output, some really interesting abilities, and a wonderful resource game that is almost unmatched in any other faction. Your guys are not massively resilient, but their damage on their big hitters, like the Slaughterborn and Proven, makes them a serious threat. Deathblow is something to keep in the back of your mind, as this is a huge spike in damage on any model and can change the course of the game if used at the right time. DARKOATH are up there as one of my favourites to play because they have this wonderfully intricate web of decision making that defines the faction's playstyle and feel, whilst never feeling too outlandishly difficult to grasp that becomes a wall you need to breach to find enjoyment. It's a very, very cool faction. But now it's time to put all that to one side and look at some lists, and I have 2 lists for you today. One is right out of the box, and one is with a little bit more money spent. So right out of the box we have the Slaughterborn, the Godspeaker, the Wrath Touched, 1 Proven with Spear, 1 Proven with Flail, 3 Glory Seekers with paired weapons, 1 Glory Seeker with a Great Axe, and a Glory Seeker with a Spear. This comes to 980 points. This is my preferred out of the box setup. The Slaughterborn is the crux of this killing force, and I am going to push Vow very hard here. I want at least 1 point of toughness early to stay alive, and then it's all attacks. Nothing but attacks. Screw strength, all attacks, all the time. The more attacks I have, the better. The Godspeaker stays at the back most of the game and uses visions to gain loads of dice and help support the Vow usage. Proven are the frontline big smackers here, and both have great range, damage and resilience thanks to that aforementioned range. Both can make use of Vow, so if an opportunity arises, then pop Vow to get more attacks and maybe a point of strength on the flail to make them a little bit punchier. Glory Seekers are in my favourite loadout, and they do work here. They are cheap, plentiful, and have a surprising amount of kill potential thanks to the abundance of paired weapons. Of course, the Wrath Touched is also here as a must, and I tend to treat this guy as a tactical nuke. This list is really solid right out the box, and you should get some great results and have a lot of fun. But of course, we also have an ally list, and this list is my preferred way to run the DARKOATHs, and this is how I've ran them for the last few games, and it has been very, very fun. So you have the Slaughterborn, the Godspeaker, a Proven with Spear, and a Proven with Flail. So far, so standard. You then take 3 Glory Seekers with paired weapons and an Ogroid Myrmidon. Now, if you're looking to really mix things up, then this is the list for you, and it comes in at exactly 1,000 points. This list gives you a very solid chaff block, some excellent kill potential, and some utility thanks to the Godspeaker. You then slot in the Ogroid Myrmidon. This thing has toughness 6, buckets of wounds, and some crazy damage output and attacks. What's more, because you have so many wild dice with the DARKOATH, you can easily support an ally like the Myrmidon without taking too much of a hit to your actual resources. It's an excellent inclusion and a beautiful model on the battlefield. I have run this list multiple times, it has performed super well, and there are just so many high value threats and so much damage on the board, and that Ogroid gives you some real staying power. It is super tough and really hard to take down. It is really like the missing piece in the DARKOATH, and I don't see myself running a list without an Ogroid Myrmidon in the future. Very, very strong. But that's all I have for you today. If you made it this far, then thank you. Your support means a lot. Please remember to leave a like, a comment and subscribe, as it helps the channel grow and reach more Warcry players. Let me know down below how you run DARKOATH, and if you have any extra tips and tricks to throw into the mix. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Ta-ra!